Elias Morgan wiped sweat from his brow as the shuttle doors hissed open, revealing the crystalline architecture of the Veldari Diplomatic Center. After 3 years studying their language and customs, he was finally setting foot on their homeworld, and already feeling woefully unprepared. Remember, his superior had warned, the Veldari value precision and brevity. Don't ramble. That was precisely Elias' problem. When nervous, he talked, a lot. And standing before the most important diplomatic mission of his career, his anxiety was at an all-time high. Distinguished linguist Morgan, a melodic voice cut through his thoughts. I am Ambassador Thalia of House Vendra, welcome to Lux Stellaris. Elias turned to face the Veldari representative and momentarily lost his train of thought. Ambassador Thalia stood nearly 7 feet tall, her iridescent skin shifting between blue and violet in the planet's golden light. Unlike the grainy holograms he'd studied, nothing prepared him for the mesmerizing quality of her luminescent eyes, 6 dark pupils arranged in a delicate pattern that seemed to take in everything at once. Ambassador Thalia, he finally managed, bowing in the traditional Veldari manner. I'm deeply honored by your personal reception. The Human Confederation values this opportunity to establish formal relations with your people, and I hope my linguistic preparations will facilitate clear communication, though I recognize there may be cultural nuances that. You speak our language well, she interrupted, her head tilting slightly, a gesture he recognized as mild amusement. Follow me, the council awaits. As they walked through corridors of what appeared to be liquid glass, Elias couldn't help himself. The architecture here is remarkable. Our researchers hypothesized your structures utilized crystallized atmospheric components, but the fluidity suggests a silicon-based compound instead, which would explain the refractive properties that. Is this relevant to the trade negotiations? Thalia asked, her secondary breathing slits narrowing, a sign of impatience Elias recognized too late. No, I apologize, just professional curiosity. Curiosity is valued, she replied, her tone softening slightly, but today focus is essential. The council chamber took his breath away, a circular room with 12 Veldari elders seated around a pool of luminous liquid that seemed to pulse with its own life. Elias' translator implant hummed as it processed the multiple tonal layers of Veldari speech. Throughout the introductions, he managed to maintain protocol, but when discussions turned to specific trade agreements, his anxiety resurfaced. Each time a complex concept arose, Elias found himself over-explaining human perspectives, clarifying points no one had questioned, and adding unnecessary context. And while human agricultural techniques might initially seem incompatible with Veldari soil composition, our scientists have developed methods that could complement your existing systems without disrupting the native ecosystem, which I can elaborate on if. Linguist Morgan, one elder interrupted, is the concept not simpler than you present it? Thalia's gaze shifted to him, all 6 pupils contracting slightly. Perhaps our translator would benefit from observing more and explaining less. Heat rushed to Elias' face. Yes, of course, I tend to elaborate when anxious. Anxiety indicates care, Thalia observed unexpectedly, but communication requires space between words. As the session concluded, Elias felt he'd barely survived his first diplomatic test. When Thalia approached him afterward, he braced for criticism. Instead, she studied him with what he hoped was curiosity. You humans rely heavily on verbal exchange. Interesting. We do, he admitted. Words are our primary tool for connection. There are other ways to connect, she said, her skin rippling with patterns he couldn't interpret. Perhaps tomorrow you might learn one. Something in her tone made Elias' heart race, though whether from diplomatic opportunity or something more personal, he couldn't tell. I look forward to it, Ambassador, he replied, feeling the first genuine connection since his arrival. As she walked away, Elias couldn't help but wonder what other forms of communication might exist between their species, and why the thought made him both terrified and exhilarated. The Veldari council chamber was even more intimidating the second day. Prismatic light filtered through the crystalline walls, casting rainbow shadows across the 12 stern faces of the elders. Elias Morgan stood beside Ambassador Thalia, acutely aware that today's discussions would determine whether humanity gained access to Veldari's revolutionary healing technologies. His palm grew damp around the data tablet as Elder Korvax, the most skeptical of the council members, began questioning the human delegation's intentions. Your species has a history of exploitation. What assurance can you provide that our healing crystals won't become weapons in human hands? Elias cleared his throat. Elder Korvax, I understand your concerns completely. Earth's history does include regrettable instances of technological misappropriation, which is why our proposal includes comprehensive oversight committees with both human and Veldari representation to ensure all applications remain strictly medical. Additionally, we've implemented a multi-tiered security protocol that restricts. You speak many words that say little, Korvax interrupted, his 6 eyes narrowing simultaneously. Elias felt sweat beading on his forehead. I apologize for my verbosity, what I mean to say is. Perhaps, another elder cut in, the human doesn't trust us to understand simple concepts without excessive elaboration. Thalia's skin flashed a pattern that Elias recognized as diplomatic intervention. The human translator is trying to be thorough, she said, though he detected tension in her melodic voice. As the questioning continued, Elias' anxiety spiraled. Each time he opened his mouth, explanations poured out in nervous torrents. He explained human medical ethics, economic interests, cultural perspectives on healing, elaborating on points no one had questioned, watching as the Veldari Council members' breathing slits narrowed in what he now recognized as growing irritation. During a brief recess, Thalia pulled him into a private alcove, her iridescent skin pulsing with colors he hadn't seen before, deep purples and flashes of something almost crimson. Linguist Morgan, she said, her voice dropping to a frequency that made his chest vibrate, you are jeopardizing 3 years of preliminary negotiations. I'm trying to be comprehensive, he defended weakly. You are drowning them in words, she countered. Veldari value the space between statements as much as the statements themselves. Your constant speech is interpreted as mistrust of our intelligence or, worse, deception. Elias ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, when I'm nervous I over-explain, it's how humans often process uncertainty. Thalia studied him, all 6 pupils dilating slightly. Then perhaps we need to approach this differently. She moved closer, her height making him tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. The Veldari have another communication method for situations where words fail us. Another language, he asked hopefully. Not language, understanding. Her voice had changed, carrying new harmonic undertones his translator couldn't quite process. Elias Morgan, I am invoking the rite of Venshala's silent communion. It is rarely offered to outsiders. I don't understand. She stepped even closer, the light emanating from her skin casting patterns across his face. Stop talking, she said firmly, her hand hovering near his cheek without touching it. Use your mouth differently. His eyes widened. I'm not sure what you. Not for speech, she clarified, her secondary breathing slits flaring slightly. For connection. The Veldari communicate through touch and presence when words become barriers. Your mouth, your hands, they must learn to listen rather than speak. Understanding dawned on him, a tactile form of communication. More than that, a temporary biological synchronization. She extended her hand, palm up, its surface shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. It requires trust and silence. Elias hesitated, his diplomatic training warring with his curiosity. Is this standard protocol? No, she admitted, but neither is sending a diplomat who cannot stop explaining things we already understand. The subtle humor in her voice disarmed him. What do I need to do? First, she said, her tone softening, you need to trust that not everything requires words. She placed her palm just centimeters from his. Second, you must be willing to let another consciousness touch yours. The implications made Elias' heart race. Is it dangerous? Only if you resist. Her skin pulsed with gentle light. Will you try, linguist Morgan, or shall we continue failing with words? He took a deep breath, looking into her multifaceted eyes. In them, he saw not just an alien diplomat but someone genuinely trying to bridge the gap between their species. I'll try, he said finally, extending his hand to hers. Good, Thalia replied, her skin brightening. Because the future of our alliance may depend on what happens when you finally stop talking. As their hands came together, Elias felt a tingling sensation spread up his arm, and for once in his life, words completely failed him. When Thalia's palm finally pressed against his, Elias gasped. The sensation defied description, like electricity without pain, like submersion without drowning. Her skin's bioluminescence pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, creating patterns that seemed to flow between them. Don't fight it, she whispered, her last words before the silence took hold. They sat cross-legged in the private meditation chamber adjoining the council room, knees almost touching. The Venshala ritual had begun, and Elias struggled to quiet his racing thoughts. His mind kept trying to analyze, categorize, and verbalize the experience even as it unfolded. Thalia's free hand rose to his face, hovering just above his temple. Her eyes, those mesmerizing 6-pupiled orbs, closed halfway as she nodded slightly. Hesitantly, he mirrored her gesture, his human hand trembling as it reached toward her face. When his fingertips brushed her temple, something shifted. The room seemed to fall away, replaced by impressions and emotions that weren't his own. Wonder, curiosity, mild exasperation. Beneath it all, a surprising warmth he hadn't expected from the seemingly stoic ambassador. Too much thinking still came the impression, not words exactly, but a concept transmitted directly from her consciousness to his. Elias tried to respond verbally, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. Instead, he concentrated on pushing his apology toward her, imagining it traveling through their connected hands. A ripple of something like amusement flowed back to him. Her skin shifted to a warmer hue, illuminating the space between them with amber light. The message was clear even without words. Try again. Simpler. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing instead of language. In, out, in, out. Gradually, as his analytical mind quieted, he began to sense patterns beneath the surface of thought, currents of meaning and emotion that existed beyond language. Images drifted between them. He saw the Veldari homeworld through her eyes, not just its physical beauty but its significance, the emotional resonance of places he'd only seen as a tourist. He felt her sense of duty, her hope for what an alliance with humans might bring, and beneath it all, a loneliness he recognized all too well. Without intending to, he revealed his own isolation, brilliant but awkward, always analyzing rather than experiencing, using words to keep emotional connection at bay. His fear of silence because silence meant truly being present. Hours passed like minutes. When they finally separated, the sun had set over the crystal city, leaving the room bathed in the natural bioluminescence of Veldari architecture. Elias slumped back, physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated. That was, he began, then stopped, realizing words would only diminish the experience. Thalia's skin rippled with patterns he now recognized as gentle amusement. You're learning, she said softly. I felt everything. He looked down at his hands, still tingling from the connection. Your world, your people's hopes for this alliance, it's not just about the healing crystals for you. No, she agreed, just as it's not just about technological advancement for you. His eyes met hers, suddenly self-conscious about the personal emotions he'd inadvertently shared. How much did you see? Enough to understand why you hide behind explanations, she said, her tone gentler than he'd ever heard it. Words are your shield, silence makes you vulnerable. And the Veldari value vulnerability, he said, realizing the cultural gulf he'd been missing. We value truth, sometimes words obscure it, silence reveals it. She rose gracefully to her feet, extending a hand to help him up. Tomorrow you will face the council again. Will you speak differently now? The touch of her hand sent a smaller echo of their earlier connection through him. I'm not sure I know how. You do, she assured him. Your problem was never not knowing enough. It was not trusting that understanding could exist without explanation. As they walked back toward the council chambers, Elias noticed he could still sense echoes of her emotional state, a lingering effect of the Venshala. More surprising was the realization that he could feel her awareness of his presence, a warm attention that followed him even when she wasn't looking his way. Thalia, he said as they reached the massive crystal doors, what happens if we need to do this again? She turned, her skin momentarily flashing a pattern he hadn't seen before, something almost intimate. The first Venshala creates a bridge, subsequent connections become deeper, more comprehensive. Is that common, multiple connections? Between diplomats, no, her pupils dilated slightly. Between those who find unexpected resonance, sometimes. As she turned to leave, Elias caught a fleeting impression, not in words but in feeling, of something beyond diplomatic interest. Something personal and intriguing that made his heart rate quicken. For once, he didn't try to analyze it into submission. Some things he was learning existed beyond explanation. The next 3 days transformed Elias. In the council chamber, he spoke with newfound economy, allowing silence to punctuate his statements. When questioned, he responded with precision rather than defensive elaboration. The Veldari elders noticed, their breathing slits relaxed, their postures more receptive. But the real transformation happened in the evenings, when official duties ended and Thalia led him through the crystalline gardens of Lux Stellaris. Each night, they shared another Venshala, each connection deeper than the last. Through their silent communion, Elias learned more about Veldari culture than 3 years of academic study had provided. Tonight, they sat beside a pool of bioluminescent water, its surface reflecting both moons of the Veldari homeworld. Their hands joined with practiced ease now, the initial shock of connection replaced by a warm familiarity. You're troubled, he sensed from her, no longer needing words to understand her concern. He didn't try to hide his worry. The negotiations had been proceeding well until Ambassador Krell from the rival Veldari faction had arrived that morning. Krell represented the isolationist minority who opposed any alliance with humans, and his presence had reopened debates Elias thought settled. Krell questions your intentions, she communicated, images of the ambassador's forceful arguments flowing between them. But there's something else. Elias let her see his deeper fear, that tomorrow's final session would determine not just the alliance's fate but also his future with her. In 3 days' time, regardless of outcome, he was scheduled to return to Earth. Thalia's skin pulsed with a pattern he'd come to recognize as sadness, tinged with something warmer. Through their connection, he sensed her conflicted loyalties, duty to her people against growing personal feelings. Their connection shifted subtly. The professional barriers they'd maintained even during Venshala began to dissolve. Elias felt himself being drawn deeper into her consciousness than ever before, and she into his. No longer just exchanging thoughts or impressions, but merging on a level that transcended physical differences. He sensed memories that were not his own, Thalia's childhood among the crystal spires, her years of dedicated service, the loneliness of her position. She in turn experienced his isolated human existence, his search for meaning through language and connection, the emptiness that had driven him to the stars. When they finally separated, something fundamental had changed. Thalia's skin glowed with patterns he'd never seen before, intimate, personal colors that his translator couldn't interpret but his heart somehow understood. That was, he whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. The deepest form of Venshala, she confirmed, her six-pupiled eyes studying him with an intensity that made his skin warm. It is usually reserved for. For what? He asked when she hesitated. Those forming life bonds, she said quietly. The implications hung between them. Not just diplomatic allies or cultural bridges, but something far more personal, a possibility neither had anticipated. I don't know if my people would understand, he admitted. Mine might not either. Her hand reached for his again, this time without initiating Venshala, a purely physical touch that carried its own kind of intimacy. But understanding sometimes comes after acceptance, not before. Their faces drew closer, curiosity about their physiological differences momentarily overshadowed by the emotional connection binding them. Her skin illuminated with anticipation as Elias leaned forward. The kiss was unlike anything he'd experienced, her skin cool against his lips, tiny electrical sensations dancing where they touched. Not quite human, not quite Veldari, but something beautifully in between. When they separated, her breathing slits fluttered rapidly, the Veldari equivalent of breathlessness. Your species uses mouths for this too, she observed with soft amusement. Some forms of communication are universal, he replied, feeling oddly shy despite having shared consciousness with her multiple times. A distant alarm sounded, indicating the approach of curfew for off-worlders. Reality crashed back to Morrow's final negotiation, Ambassador Krell's opposition, his imminent departure. Krell will use any means to prevent the alliance, Thalia warned, her tone serious again, including questioning your integrity before the council. Let him, Elias said with newfound confidence. Words can't hurt us anymore. She studied him, her bioluminescence pulsing in a pattern he recognized as concern mixed with pride. You've changed, Elias Morgan. You've changed me, he corrected. Tomorrow, whatever happens with the alliance, we need to discuss what comes after. After, she repeated, the word carrying weight beyond its single syllable. Yes. As they walked back toward the diplomatic quarter, their hands occasionally brushed, each touch a small echo of their deeper connection. Tomorrow would decide everything, the fate of human Veldari relations, and the possibility of a future neither had imagined possible a week ago. Neither spoke further. They discovered that sometimes the most important things existed in the spaces between words. The final council chamber gleamed with ceremonial light, every crystal surface polished to perfection for this historic moment. 12 elders seated in silent judgment, Ambassador Krell's faction standing in opposition, and between them, Elias and Thalia, united yet separate in their official capacities. The human speaks of trust, Krell addressed the council, his skin flashing confrontational patterns. Yet their history speaks of conquest, their biology speaks of incompatibility, their very presence here speaks of opportunism. Once, such accusations would have triggered a torrent of defensive explanation from Elias. Now he waited, allowing the translation to settle, giving space to the silence that followed. Elder Korvax turned to him. How do you respond, linguist Morgan? Elias rose slowly. Elder Korvax, esteemed counsel, I could offer reassurances, statistics, or guarantees. He paused, feeling Thalia's presence beside him like a physical warmth. Instead, I offer understanding. He extended his hand, palm up, the gesture unmistakable to every Veldari present. A request for Venshala not in private but before the entire council. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Krell's skin flashed with outrage. This is blasphemy. The sacred connection is not a diplomatic tool. It is not a tool at all, Elias responded calmly. It is truth. Elder Korvax leaned forward. Ambassador Thalia, you have shared Venshala with this human. I have, she confirmed, her voice steady despite the risk to her position. Multiple times. This violates protocol, Krell insisted. No outsider may. Our oldest laws state that Venshala may be shared with any being capable of truth, another elder interrupted. The question is not whether it was permitted, but what was discovered. All eyes turned to Thalia. She rose with graceful dignity. I discovered that words, whether human or Veldari, can create barriers as easily as bridges. In silence, I found understanding beyond translation. And what did you understand? Elder Korvax asked. That humans and Veldari, despite our differences, share a fundamental truth: connection matters more than protection. Her skin pulsed with conviction. What Ambassador Krell fears is not exploitation but change. Krell moved to object, but Elias stepped forward. I request Venshala with Ambassador Krell. The chamber fell silent. Such a request was unprecedented. I refuse, Krell said immediately. Why? Elias asked simply. If your concerns are genuine, would truth not validate them? The challenge hung in the air. Thalia's eyes met Elias', concern evident in their depths. This was dangerous territory. No human had ever attempted Venshala with a hostile Veldari. The council permits this exchange, Elder Korvax announced before Krell could retreat further. Ambassador Krell, your concerns merit exploration. Will you not verify them directly? Trapped by his own rhetoric, Krell reluctantly extended his hand. Very well, let the human see the truth of my objections. As their palms connected, Elias braced himself for hostility. Instead, he encountered fear, not hatred of humans but terror of change, of cultural dissolution, of loss. Beneath Krell's political posturing lay genuine concern for his people's identity. Rather than arguing, Elias opened himself completely, offering not just reassurances but vulnerabilities. Humanity's mistakes, lessons learned, hopes for mutual growth rather than dominance. He showed Krell his own transformation through Venshala with Thalia, how understanding transcended mere agreement. When they separated, Krell appeared shaken. The human's mind is different than I anticipated. And yours is exactly as honorable as I expected, Elias replied, offering the dignity of acknowledgement rather than victory. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The alliance would proceed, with additional protections for Veldari cultural sovereignty that Elias himself suggested based on Krell's genuine concerns. As the chamber emptied, Elias found himself beside Thalia in the antechamber, protocol temporarily forgotten in the aftermath of success. My departure is scheduled for tomorrow, he said quietly. I know, her skin pulsed with colors he now recognized as conflicted emotion. I've requested reassignment as permanent liaison to Lux Stellaris. He stepped closer. If that would be acceptable to you professionally and personally. Professionally, it would benefit both our peoples, she replied formally, then let her official demeanor slip. Personally, I would have no objections. He reached for her hand. There's still much I don't understand about your world. And much I don't understand about yours. Her fingers interlaced with his, skin illuminating where they touched. Perhaps we could learn together. I'd like that, he whispered, no longer needing Venshala to share his emotions. They were plain in his eyes, his voice, his touch. There is another ritual, she said softly, for those who wish to form a permanent bond across lifetimes. It is called Venthara. Is it also silent? He asked. Her skin rippled with a pattern he now recognized as intimate amusement. Not entirely. Some emotions demand expression. I think, he said, drawing her closer, I finally understand when to speak and when to be silent. Under the crystal dome of Lux Stellaris, their mouths met again, neither human nor Veldari, but something new, something shared. Around them, the city's bioluminescence pulsed in harmony with their connection, a silent language of love transcending biology, culture, and the vast distances between stars. 6 months later, they would make history again, the first human Veldari bonding ceremony ever performed, a bridge between worlds built not on technology or politics, but on the universal truth Elias had learned that first day. Sometimes the most profound understanding begins when we stop explaining and start connecting. Communication, he discovered, wasn't about finding the right words. It was about finding the right silence and the right person to share it with.